All right, so we're going to move along, and now we're going to look at some neurobiology, but this time we're going to actually now include some of the hormonal stuff. So let's talk about neurohormones or just hormones in general. And the word means to travel. So what it means is you have some endocrine gland uh, that is producing a hormone of some sort, and then that is going to be sent through the bloodstream, typically, to another area, some kind of target cell where it'll actually work. And so what I want you to know is there's really two types. There are protein or peptide hormones. A peptide hormone is just a small protein. It can be stored and they don't require carrier chemicals, so they can just float in the bloodstream, no problem. Acetylcholine was one of those. Growth hormone is another. So our body has lots of different ones. And then there's also steroid hormones, and these are a little slower in their use. They can't be stored, so they're released directly into the bloodstream. And then they may take a while to work, and they usually, not always, but most of them need something to attach to as they go through the blood. Estrogen and testosterone are examples of steroid hormones. And so just to kind of give you an idea of how it physically works. Okay, so what we want you to know is more in kind of a general idea is hormone systems release, they have an input. So there's some environmental stimulus that releases one of the hormones. It then kind of goes through the nervous system, processes what's going on, what are we going to do with this, and then there is some output or effect. We're gonna move this muscle. We're going to get this gland to secrete something. We're going to get this organ to do something. And then basically we see a behavior on the end of this. So for instance, on the bottom here, it can trigger a behavior. It can modify a behavior that's already happening, increase it or decrease it, or it can even prime the behavior, make you more likely to do something. And so we have an example on the bottom over here of testosterone. Testosterone levels increase when males fight. And what happens then is as they fight, the testosterone level will go up. And then winning the fight actually causes more testosterone. That win jacks you up, which might prime you for another fight. And so it increases the circulation of testosterone in the body. Okay, and just to give you effects of long term, there's a study done on white rats, I guess, white mice, they're mice, on pregnancy, and we really don't think about this, but males, they were looked at embryos, and obviously mice have lots of babies, so they found out that males that were surrounded by two other male embryos were affected by higher levels of testosterone. What makes men is testosterone. And it turns out what makes women is not estrogen. It is actually the lack of testosterone or the low levels. Females do have testosterone. So it's interesting that if I'm a male embryo and I have two surrounding me, there's higher levels of testosterone. And what they found out when they come out, what they call these 2M males, they're more aggressive, and they mark their territories more, and they have more copulations with females. And then ones that are surrounded by two females, they're not being exposed to that testosterone. And then you see it less. And we're going to talk about this behavior sometime when we talk about communication. In hyenas, it actually also occurs. So we'll talk about these things. All right, and so what we want to do with this study is look at honeybees. It turns out, they're all kind of related. We're going to talk about some of that with genetics. But the bees have duties, and when they first come out, they clean the cell. Pretty easy job, center of the hive, and then they start feeding the larvae or their nest mates. That's kind of the job number two. The drones, the males, and then they become this utility worker, packing pollen, fixing the hive, things like that. And then the last thing they do is actually foraging. So their life cycle goes through, and you can see how many days. Bees don't last that long, but you can see, within the 25 days, what they're most likely to do, and then their job kind of changes as they go. Yeah, there's a video on this actually. So the number of foragers do not seem to significantly change. They did a study and found out the number of foragers, and you got the young resident bees versus the added bees. So if you add a bunch of bees to it, the younger bees stay younger. They don't go forage. But then what happens if you take out all the older bees that are foraging, there's a signal that goes out, and it's basically, hey, we need food. And so the younger bees then will leave earlier and they start to change. So we're going to look at the change, and it turns out it is the juvenile hormone 3, JH3. And it's produced in a structure called the corpus allatum. And you can see it right here, kind of in the face area. And what they did is they removed that. And it is this hormone that really kind of gears these organisms to go out and forage. And without it, they don't really get that signal. And so the other hormone I want you to know that's responsible is octopamine. Also increases foraging behavior. It allows them to learn. It turns out foraging is dangerous, and you have to learn a lot about spatial. Where am I? They do these orientation flights. It helps their visual, olfactory, gustoria, which is basically taste. So all of these things, they got to know what food is. They got to be able to go find it. They got to be able to smell it, recognize it. To do the long flights, it's heavier demand. So all of these things are then caused by an increase in these two hormones. So I want you to know these hormones. And if you notice here, fight or flight, we talked about that with us, same, very, very sim. So they think this is a stress hormone. And noradrenaline, which is one of our neurotransmitters, they believe this is a stress hormone. So you see it higher. It stimulates sugar production again to fuel that flight. All right, there's also some structural orientations, and the mushroom bodies, and it's funny, this picture says it's in light blue, but it's actually the reddish stuff up here. And so it's kind of a misprint on this book, but foraging bees and foraging behavior, the mushroom bodies also get larger. What happens with bees before they actually go forage, they do what they call these orientation flights, where they'll just kind of hover and fly around. And what they're doing, I think, is, we think, is trying to figure out where are we, where is, it's kind of like learning your neighborhood. Okay, so if I'm going to fly out, and what they find out is foraging bees have a mushroom body that's 14.8% larger, so it increases in size. So there's a physical, structural part of the nervous system that increases. And they're so what you see is the size increases in these things as they become foragers. Now what they did is a foraging behavior where they remove the old foragers, and bees develop into foragers sooner. So the younger bees, the hormones kick in, and then these mushroom bodies start to expand, and they get bigger. So again, if you ask for the proximate factor, it is the mushroom bodies, it is the juvenile hormone 3, and it is and I can't pronounce it quite right, the octopamine, I think. So those three things are responsible for foraging. So we have a neurology with the thing, we have hormones with the two hormones, but then again, the ultimate cause is we need food. We have to figure out how to get food. And we'll talk about communication of bee flight when we do communication. And so we will stop the share and stop the recording.